Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's Drawing for Adults class. This class is brought to you from the Ann Arbor District Library and the Ann Arbor Art Center, both located downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. Today we are going to be doing some contour and cross-contour line drawing. If you're not familiar with this is an example here of just plain contour line drawing. Whereas this example right here is cross contour. So here you can see that there's lines that are running perpendicular to each other versus that other one. Feel free to pause this and kind of go back, and you can see what the contour line drawing, and here's another example of the cross contour. So what these are doing, it's showing you the form. So we're drawing a 3D form on a 2D surface without adding any actual shading. So rather than adding shading, we are simply drawing a line that describes the form, so that follows kind of the contour, if you will, of the object, which is why it's called a contour and cross-contour line drawing. So we are going to be creating a landscape today that does the same idea. And here is an example of what mine will look like. So just grab a pencil and a sheet of paper. You can also use ink pens. That's what I've used here so that you can kind of see that. So it's kind of like hatching or cross-hatching. If you're familiar with those techniques, then you'll be kind of familiar with the idea or the concept of having lines to create shading or to help create that sense of form and depth in your artwork. So as you can see here, I am just starting by doing a quick little sketch of my landscape, where I'm just kind of creating simple, lots of mountains and a little pond or something like that that's in between the mountains. So what I'm doing now is I'm starting to come in with a contour line drawing. So I'm going to show you a combination of both contour line drawing and cross contour line drawing. So I want to show you both so that you're able to kind of understand the difference. And what you're going to be doing as you're creating these lines is you're going to be following kind of the rock formation, for example, on these mountains, the way that the rocks would kind of break up a straight line. So think of it like, what I always like to think of it as is if you had a balloon, a deflated balloon, okay? And you take that balloon and you draw lines up and down, okay, on that, or even going across, okay? Then you blow up the balloon, all right? Now you've got this form, right? We started with kind of a sort of a 2D object with just a flat balloon, and now we've blown it up, so it's this 3-dimensional form. Well, now those straight vertical lines that you drew previously on top of that balloon, they're now curved and rounded following the form of the object, right? So that to me is always the best way to really think of how you go from straight lines to all of a sudden putting these curved lines. So if you look at your hands are a great way. If you're not familiar with drawing hands, then I would say maybe start with an apple or something a little bit more simple to practice before you really jump into this. But if you start with something like that, if you look at your hand or an apple or whatever, and if you were to draw a line and try really hard to draw a straight line going across your hand, it probably wouldn't go so well, right? You would end up with little bumps, you would see little curves. I'm not saying that you have to actually draw directly on your hand or directly on an apple and try to draw a straight line, but if you did that, you would actually probably see these contour lines, cross contour lines really start to come together. So it's really cool the way that those little indentations, those little bumps, all those little things in your hand or in an apple or whatever it is, it really does create that cross contour, that kind of bumpy little technique. And so you can be looking at a photo reference for this, or you can also just go for it and just kind of make it up. It's up to you. I recommend at least looking at some kind of photo reference for your tree or whatever it is. Now, what you're seeing me do now is kind of going back in on my lines and thickening them up a little bit. So that is basically just to help create more of the sense of depth there. So by thickening it up, it actually makes it almost look look like a little shadow kind of. So I'm making that even more exaggerated by varying the weight of my line so that I'm not just limiting myself to these really thin lines that I've created initially. So I'm thickening those up, and I think that really creates that sense of depth. You can see there on the ones that I've done, even though I haven't done them all yet. Also, I chose to do the left side of the mountains with that cross contour, mainly just to help give that illusion that that side is more the side that's kind of getting in shadow here. And so I added more lines. Of course, cross contour, the way that I did it, of course, makes it so there are more lines, twice as many lines or so, than the side with just the regular contour lines. All right, in the sky here, I'm really just doing this more for just to fill the space with something. So you can see I've added some straight lines there. You can really experiment with using different kinds of lines to create, you know, the contours, or just other kind of patterns that you wish to use. So since my water is kind of flat, you can see I'm also just adding in little dots that, you know, do kind of give the impression that maybe those are little ripples. So rather than using lines here, I'm using little dots to help create a little bit of that sense of contour. So like I said, experiment. You can also use wavy lines and different things that are a little bit more unique to create that kind of line work, to create that kind of sense of volume in your drawing. So again, this is one of those things that I would recommend practicing first on a more simple object such as an apple or your hand, or a vase would be great, like those examples that I showed at the very beginning. So while I think it's great to watch this video all the way through, I would go back to the beginning and take a look at those apples and vases and bananas, all of that I showed at the beginning, and try to do that yourself. Don't copy the drawing of those examples, but instead grab an object that's similar and then draw it yourself. Okay, and then you can kind of follow along with me as I'm doing this, and you can see how I'm getting the direction of the lines based on the contour. Once you do it first and do that little apple or something like that, it really will give you the confidence and understanding that you'll need to approach something that's a little bit more of a complex scene, such as a landscape. But I hope you have a lot of fun with this. Again, do consider going back in and thickening up some of those lines for added depth, also added contrast. Obviously that makes it a little bit darker too, so you have this really nice balance between your darks, lights, and your midtones, even though we're not doing any shading with our pencils with these. So have fun, and I hope it goes well.